All right, so let's take a look at the next pattern, which is command pattern. Okay, so this is also a very practical pattern being used in a lot of applications, especially the UI applications. So I'm going to show you some concrete example today. Now the pattern is really simple and it try to encapsulate the request for service from an object inside other objects. All right, so it's again very formal definition. Okay, let's actually take a look at what exactly the problem we're trying to solve. At the end, the goal of this pattern is that if you want to specify some kind of actions, some kind of executable command, or you got a bunch of code you want to execute at some context, is there a way we can encapsulate those commands as object so that we can store and pass those objects in any of the way we want? Okay, so basically, this pattern tells us a way to manage the execution of certain code. Now, here's one example. So they talk about one UI application, and think about this one deals with documentation. And you can open the documentation, you can close it, you can cut and copy and paste. And then every time a user click on a menu item to do the open, close, cut, you need to run some kind of a command, call some kind of function. Now, what we want you to do is instead of just putting the code directly into the method, now we want you to build a command hierarchy first. For different kind of command, you actually put the code in the command classes. So this action function will only need to create an instance and run that command. So this is what the command pattern is trying to do. Now, this is the example. So we want to build a command hierarchy that with this method called execute. Now, when you try to do a specific command, for example, open command, open document, then you just specify how you're going to open the documentation in this method called execute. And obviously, you will need a reference to the actual documentation because you want to create documentation and operate on the data. This is another example about how do you paste a documentation, and it's in the same hierarchy. And then you can also do some kind of composite command, like this is a micro command. This command can contain a sequence of a command, and you can also have a reference to itself. So that's how the command pattern works. So you got a specific hierarchy to describe the commands you want to have. And you have a method called execute, and you specify all the executions in different kind of subclasses. And each of the subclass will need to have reference on the receiver. And then the invoker will be able to call this execute method in any way they want. All right. So with that, I'm going to show you a very concrete example of how that works. So this time I'm going to show a Android application. And then you don't have to become an expert to understand this example, but I'm going to try to build a really simple Android application, a UI application that demonstrates the idea. So what I'm trying to build is I just want to have a very simple demo case that I have different kind of menu options. I'm going to lay out 3 buttons here. I want to add some different user information or student information just to show some basic UI editing features. Okay, I'm going to start to build this UI first. Right now, this UI only has one text, so I'm going to open the UI layout file, and then I'm trying to add something called linear layout, and then I will try to add some buttons here. Okay, so this one here, I will need to put orientation, horizontal, and then I need to put 3 buttons. All right, so we need to have a button for something called add. All right, and then meanwhile, to make this one simple, I'm going to actually change everything to be linear layout. All right, and then I need 2 more buttons. So one is add, one is update, one is remove. All right, so let's actually take a look at what that looks like. All right, so it looks like we got 3 buttons right here. All right, and then I also need to put ID. So these are all the basic Android development. So just so you know that we're doing the UI first, and then we got add button, update button, as well as the remove button. All right, serve button there. Now after that, now first of all, I don't need this text anymore. Now I want to build a list view so that I want to show a list of students, for example. I'll do it list view. All right, so that's a list view. And I need to put an ID here. Student list view. All right, so that's it. So I'm going to refresh and run my app, and let's take a look at how the app will looks like now. All right, so 3 buttons, 1, 2, 3, and then this one has a list, but we're not really showing anything because we haven't programmed that yet. Okay, so very quick AI app demonstration. Now right here, I am going to specify our buttons. We got an add button, and then we have a remove button. We also have update button, and then we also need a list view. All right. Now, this is all basic like Android development. You need to get a reference about all of this so that you can control these buttons. I'm going to do this very quick. So we got update, we got to remove. You basically assign these values so that you know where that button is in the UI specification. And then you also need to have a list view. Same way, font view by ID. And that's it. So this is just a basic initialization process. Now, what I want to do now is every time when I click on add button, I want to add a student name, just show the name, okay, in the list. So we basically need a list to track. We'll call it a student list. All right, we just create a basic empty student list. And then we want to specify this list of strings and show them into a list view. And then there's a very easy way to do it. So we basically need to create something called a list adapter. So we'll do a array adapter, student list adapter. Now this adapter here will be new array list adapter. And now here we need to provide some different information. We need to provide a context. And then what else we need to provide here? Let's see. We need to provide a resource and also the object. All right, so the resource, we use Android layout simple list item 1. All right, and then we provide a student list. Okay, so this line here is basically to map our student list into the student list view so that you can show it. So I'm going to run this app again. And right now, I don't think we can see anything because we're not adding any of this student yet. So if I click on the button, nothing will happen, right? So what we need to do now is to program the button. So for add button, so if you ever click on this button, right? So we're going to add a item into the student list view. And in order to do that, you will need to add something here in the student list. So for example, student 1, right? And after that, if you want to refresh it, and then we need to basically let the adapter know something got to change. All right, so I'm going to rerun this one again. Let's take a look. So I'm going to click on add, and we're adding the list, but it looks like this is not really updated. Oh, because we did not set student list view set adapter. We did not connect them together. So after this, you will be able to see the changes. Click on add, and then we add one more student. All right, so every time we click, we're gonna add it. Now I want to differentiate a little bit about the name. I don't want to always call one, so I can just do some kind of a general I would just use a timestamp maybe, just as a very simple way to generate some different IDs. Okay, so I'll try this again. Click on add, and you can see different names generated. All right, so that's how I do an add. So to clarify, so when you click on the add button, we're gonna run this piece of code, add a student into the list, and then change and update the student list adapter. All right, so that's how it works. And then similarly, we also want to do, for example, let's do a remove. Remove, well, let's also say like randomly pick something, right? And then we delete it. So we can basically see how many students we have. We randomly pick a random function. All right, so we want to say that selected student to remove the next int. I think will be based on the student list size. All right, so based on that, we can say that student list dot remove. And this index, and after that, we're gonna call the adapter to say, okay, something got changed. All right, so this is how you implement the remove method. Okay, so let's see, I'm gonna add a few of those, I'm gonna remove. Okay, so it's just automatically remove something from the list. All right, and then if you are running out of element, you can't remove anymore. And then we also want to do the update. Okay, update button. All right, so with this, I can also do something similar. I can randomly pick a student and then update their name. All right, so we'll see student list dot get. At this specific string, I think we need to set it. Okay, so do we have a set? Yeah, we have set. So we want to set the specific position with a new name. Okay, I'll call it student update, or I'll call it maybe student plus timestamp with some kind of a marker here to say that, okay, the student had been updated. All right, and then once you change it, we will notify the list so we can update the view. Run this again. I'm gonna add a lot of students. I can remove, I can still adding them, I can also update them. Okay, as you can see, I just randomly pick some of this list items and then update them. You can still remove and then add. All right, so I have done a very simple UI application that involve different actions and different data, and then also some kind of a change and updates. Now, what we're doing right now is not based on the command pattern, because every time when I click on the button to run things, now this is the action for adding, this is the action for updating, this is the action for deleting. So we are just putting the code directly into the functions, and then we're now following the command pattern. If you look at the command pattern, now we need to have a hierarchy to deal with this. All right, so that's why I'm going to create a new package. I'll call the command, and then I'm going to create my interface, call the command. All right. Now for the command, I need one method, which is execute. All right. Now I will need three different commands. I will need add a command. All right. This one is going to implement our command interface. All right. And then we were going to move the code of adding the student list and notifying and change it into that add command. Okay, so in order to do that, well, it looks like we need to access to the student list. We need also access to the student list adapter. So we actually need to build those two into our command pattern here. So we need this, but then we just need a reference. So that means as you create this command pattern, we will need you to pass in this two attributes. All right, so I'm going to use this one to help us do it. All right, so you will need to basically create this pass a list and adapter, and then with this you can specify the same kind of changes right here. All right, so I'm going to do this, put it here. All right, so that's how you can do the add command. So it's the same kind of code. I'm just relocating the code into this object, and then later on you will see why we're trying to do this. Okay, so that's the command pattern. Sorry, add pattern. Now in the same way, I'm going to copy and make this very quick. I'm going to make an update command. I'm going to do a remove command. And this way, and it all falls into the same hierarchy, but then the code is different. So for the updates, this is what we need. Again, just changing the code from one class to another one. And then here is how we do the remove. Okay, so with this, let's see if we can replace our application with the kind of command pattern. So right here, I don't need to do this anymore. I'll just do a command. Okay, it will be the new command. Now we will need our student list and student list adapter. All right, so we do command dot execute. Okay, and the same way, I don't need to do this one anymore. What I need is an update command. All right, and then finally, remove command. All right, so let's test it out. So same kind of functionality, but the code here looks a lot easier because it's just command-based, object-based. So add, still works, update, remove, and add. All right, so that is a command pattern. Okay, really straightforward. As you can see, we don't want you to put all this execution code inside the method, but then we want you to use object to represent them. So you can actually divide your execution code from your main UI class and into a different, put them into a different hierarchy. Okay, so that's the core idea of a command pattern. And you might be wondering, so why are we doing this? Again, number one is for clean up the code, and then for extensibility. So for example, we're adding new command, and then now I can just create a new command class here. And then when you are trying to pick which one to use, you don't need to actually move around a lot of different code. You can just choose which command object to create and then just execute it. All right. However, there is a much more important use case for this pattern, which is to deal with undo and redo. Now think about this is a really cool feature in any of the editors. So for example, if I'm writing the code, okay, we often use this feature called Control Z. So when I press Control Z, it's undo it, another Control Z, undo it, undo. So it's recording all these editing operations. I can also do redo, and I will come back. I redo all of those. Undo and redo is a really useful thing in the editing environment, but you probably never thought about how we implement it. Now, command pattern can make this thing really easy to do. Now, this is the how. In order to do the undo and redo, so you need to know if I execute one thing, how can I turn it back? So for example, I add a student. If you want to undo it, well, you have to delete it. Or this one, you change a student. Now, if you want to undo it, you need to reset name back. And this one, same thing. If you remove something, you want to undo it, then you will need to add it back. So that means in the command pattern, instead of just saying about execution, we can also specify, could you tell us how do you undo it? So I'll call it unexecuted. So if you do this, well, now everything need to do more work. Let's actually implement it. So for add, okay, so you add something here, and then if you try to unexecute it, well, you need to know which one you add, and then so that you can delete it. right? So that means that every time when you add something like right here, I think we're adding it all the way to the end of the list. Now we need to record which one did we add, which position did we add. That's one thing. And then so we will need to create something called a position. So every time we are adding it, and then we should update this position to be the student list dot size -1, the index of the object you're adding. That way, if you try to get it back, well, you need to make sure you delete that specific thing at that position. All right. So for example, if I want to undo my add student, I need to actually to remove it. So when I remove it, I will need to know which one did you add. So I will use this position value. And after that, I will notify the change. So as you can see, every command, you could put this kind of logic to deal with how do you undo it, right? And then let's try to do the same thing, okay? So I'm gonna do add, and then we'll do remove. Remove maybe the upper side of add, probably it's easier. Okay, so this one also I will need to know the position you're deleting. And then when you undo it, so I need to get it back. And then also you need to record, okay, what is the string? Okay, you actually what is the name? We delete it. So we need to record all of those. Okay, so position will be selected student, and the name will be student list. We need to get it before we delete it. All right. Now this one reminds me, for add, I think we also need to keep the name because otherwise each time it's different. Well, no, for add we don't need it because the undo is actually just to delete it, so we don't need to, actually remember the name, so that's fine. So remove right here, but for undo the remove, we need to add it back. So student list dot add. We need to add something in the position. I think there should be a function for us to do it. At this position, we're adding this name here. Okay, and then we notify. This I changed. That's how you undo and delete function. For update, I think it's very similar. So we need to know which one you were changing and the position and what was the name you updated. That way I can just specify set at that position with that name and then notify all the data set, but then make sure we record them. And then name will be student list.get. All right, something like this. So we are adding a total like support for the undo. So if you want to try that, okay, so let's actually put 2 more buttons to our UI. So I'm gonna do this one more time. Something similar, I'll add more buttons below it. This time I just need 2 buttons. I need a undo button and then redo button, undo and redo. All right, so I need to change the ID, already did that. All right, so let's go back here. And so I need to program this. Okay, so for undo, oh, I need to specify also the buttons right here. 2 more buttons, undo, and then go down. Same thing here. All right, so we got 2 buttons. Now we need to program them. Okay, undo, set on click listener. All right, so now we need to think about if you do try to click on undo, then what's going to happen? So I'm going to go back here, rerun the app. Now you should be able to see 2 more buttons shows up. All right, I can still add this, remove, update, add them. But then when I click on undo, depends on what was the last command, and then we need to actually find it and then run and execute. So that means we need to track the whole history of the execution. Now you can see with command pattern, it's really easy to do because every command you did was an object. If you don't use this object, then there's no way you can track that status. All right, in order to track that status, now you might need to start to think about the actual data structure. Now some of you might have seen that. The best way to do this is actually to use a stack, because this undo logic is always to undo the latest one. So the first in, last out, right? So the latest pushed on the target stack will be undo first. So we'll call this one undo stack. All right, so that means every time when you are executing things, well, you need to make sure you push that into the stack. That way, we'll have a complete records on what you executed last time. Now, whenever you click on the undo button, now all we need to do is to use the stack to pop it, get the first one. And then, as you can see, I will just do command dot and execute. That's it. All right, so I'm gonna go back to my app. Now this time, let's try this carefully. So add a few things. Okay, I'm gonna undo it. As you can see, it's actually deleting the things. All right, I'm gonna add this again and undo them. So that's how the add works. I'm gonna do remove. I remove this one, undo it, and then they're putting back. I'm updating this too, undo it, and they're going back. Everything has been recorded, but this whole undo logic is so simple because it's controlled by a stack. And then you can do whatever you like. Now, in the similar way to wrap it up, I can build another stack for redo, because redo is a little bit more complicated, because as you do the undo, you might still want to get it back. So you always want to track the whole history of this command. So if you ever do an undo, now make sure you also add it to redo, just in case now you want to run it again. So we'll add this command. Now with that, you can specify your redo button. Basically, the redo button is always going to get your redo stack. All right, and then at this time, you just need to do the execute. Now the execute. And every time when you execute it here, also make sure that you push this one to the undo stack. So there are actually a total of 2 stacks in the system that keep tracking of the undo and redo. So every command as you go through the undo redo, it will move around between the 2 stacks. So finally, let's actually run this code one more time. So add, update, add, update. All right, so I can undo it. I can also try to redo it. Yeah. Add, delete, undo it, redo it. All right, so that's how this whole logic works. Okay, but none of this can be done easily if we're not using this object-based command pattern. As you can see, everything now, the logic goes to this hierarchy that in the actual application, you can just use an object to do this very simple execute and execute thing, and use the stack to control the 2 operation stack. That's the best way to deal with this situation. All right, so that's kind of called command pattern. Any kind of editor environment you're using probably will be based on a command pattern. All of this, like here in IntelliJ or Android Studio, there's so many kind of options, but every one of those, especially something related with editor, it will be recorded as an object like this. Okay, so take a look at this pattern and then give it a try on your own.